Okay, welcome everyone. Happy 2026. I'll call this meeting to order and begin by acknowledging the deep respect that we are gathered on the traditional and ancestral territories of the Amish Nation, their relationship to this land and water surrounding the Niquelaweb. Bowen Island is ancient and enduring, and we honor their ongoing leadership. Welcome to the Bowen Island Municipality meeting of Monday, January 12th, 2026, and thank you for joining. I'm Andrew Leonard, the Mayor of Bowen Island and the chair of this meeting. I'd like to introduce the other elected members of Bowen Island's Council here this afternoon. Starting on my far right, we have Councillor Island's trustee, Sue Ellen Fast. On her left is Councillor Island's trustee, Judy Getty. On my far left is Councillor John Saunders. To his right is Councillor Tim Lake. And to his right is Councillor Alice Morse. We are also joined by several members of our professional staff team here this afternoon, including our Chief Administrative Officer, Karen Dillon, our Corporate Officer, Sophie Insigna, as well as other members of staff who will be presenting reports here today. This meeting is being recorded, and when members of the public speak during the question and answer and public comment portion of the meeting, your presence and voice will be included in the permanent recording, which is available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca and is also kept on our YouTube channel where it is live streaming to the masses right now. This council is an official meeting for the conducting of the business of local government. We all love our community. We are all passionate about what happens here. I encourage everyone to maintain a constructive and respectful tone during the meeting and to address comments during the public comment and question and answer portion of the meeting to myself. For those, and I just noticed we do have Councillor Alex Jurgensen who has joined us online today as well. So we do have a full council. For those following along either in the room or online or at a later date, the agenda and full council package, including all of the staff reports and materials for today's meeting, can be found on our website at bowenislandmunicipality.ca. I ask everyone to turn to their agenda. Closed out lines, so just give me a minute here. I look to the corporate officer for the addition of any late items here today.
There's one untable item provided for this agenda, and it is a letter drafted by yourself, Mayor Andrew Leonard, regarding the Islands Trust Policy Statement. And that would be item 6.1A.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I will look for a motion to adopt the agenda and late.
I so move.
Moved by Councillor Jurgensen, seconded by Councillor Wake. Any further discussion, changes, amendments? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Councillor Getty opposed, and that carries. Moving on to public comments today. I'll look to our corporate officer for any public comments here today.
We have no public comments this afternoon.
Okay. And then moving on to delegations 3.1, we have Rob Forbes from the Bowen Island Museum and Archives regarding funding increase proposal. Thank you, Mr. Forbes, for joining us here today.
Thank you. Thank you. Get myself ready here. Mayor Leonard and Council. I'm just going to summarize the our submission to Council for increased core funding in the next 4 years, from 2026 to 2029. The Bowen Island Museum and Archives wishes to renew its core community organizational funding agreement for the next 4 years. Museum and Archives has committed to collecting, preserving, and promoting and presenting our vibrant and diverse history. And this is primarily done through our 2 part-time staff. They work a total of 33 hours per week, much more than that, actually. The quality of the programs and weekly workload is no longer sustainable at the current funding levels. And at the same time, the staff salary rates have not increased in many years and no longer reflect the local cost of living. We are requesting an increase in funding so that we can increase staff hours to better reflect the demand of their tasks and their positions as archivist and curator, which better reflects the payable rate of their positions and the quality of the work that they provide. An increase in staff remuneration is long overdue, and we're at risk of losing capable and dedicated staff if this issue is not resolved fairly soon. We have two major and consistent funding sources, and that's the Bowen Island Municipality as well as the BC Gaming Grant. For the Bowen Island Municipality, we renewed our core funding request in the fall of 2022. And increased funding didn't happen. We did receive a small increase of $1,000, but we haven't received any core increase since 2018. The BC Gaming Grant, even though we've had incremental increases through them, this last year, they decided to give us status quo. There was a lack of funds available last year, so they kept us at status quo. That's the first time we've been denied an increase. The archivist has had their current rate for over rate of pay for over 15 years, and the curator at least for the last 5 years. We've been playing catch up for a long time. And also the curator is working much more hours than what she's getting paid for. And it kind of reflects what we're requesting is what we're after. Let's see. Our organization is pleased to have consistently upgraded and maintained our computers, building maintenance, and website, our database, which is the gold standard. So we've got a lot of good things happening. I think it really comes down to we've kept up with the technological advances to provide online access to researchers and community alike. We provided a 4-year plan that you can review, but these programs and services reflect our museum and archives core mandate and current responsibilities. The museum and archives aligns directly with the Bowen Island official community plan. Emphasis on heritage conservation, community identity, education, and inclusive community well-being. The time-limited projects, the major ones we got going on right now is a new Bowen Island history book, the Japanese Canadian Legacy Project. We've just created a speaker series as well. Notable experts in their fields are invited to public lectures. We have our core programs and services, collecting archival collecting and archiving documents and materials of historical significance. Timely exhibits. We've got education and community engagement, historical interpretation and legacy stewardship, publications and knowledge sharing, governance, compliance, and organizational sustainability, maintaining and enhancing staff capacity is crucial to maintaining core services. In conclusion, the staff have gone over and above their duties and the duties to do well research and detailed work beyond paid hours. They have been inclusive and have outreach to the rest of the community in all the programs and exhibits. They deserve the recognition and support to continue their wonderful work. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Charles. Open it up to council for questions or comments of delegation.
I'm curious about the Heritage Commission transfer or work.
Yeah.
I didn't see any mention of that in there. Is that something that those tasks, are they included in your proposal, or are they?
Yes, actually, it was mentioned. I think
Okay,
it's further down.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it was mentioned. I don't, but we didn't necessarily put it in this proposal because we initially with Alex, we thought we were going to put them together. Then we found out we were going to separate it. So that's why it's been kept separate, but there has been mention of that. I remember Kathy specifically mentioned that.
I've seen a letter from Kathy and I just hadn't heard it in your particular words. But
Right.
Thank you. Okay, good. I know it's in progress.
Councilor Goody.
So, what are the other materials that we're looking at? There's a letter from, Kathy Bailey and
I'm not,
there's a plan.
I-
Did you take?
well,
Yeah.
our submission
Okay.
and the finances as well.
Saunders?
Thank you, through the chair. I'm just trying to. I'm looking at a lot of different numbers here and
Yep.
some of them, obviously, that's a 2024 statement, but the highlighted portion, you've got municipal grant request funding 64,000.
Yeah.
Is that up from 62,000 or is that?
No, that's up from.
That's up from 33,000. So you're
Yes.
asking it
That's
essentially
right.
to be double. Okay, that's what I thought I was reading, but I wasn't sure. All right, thank you.
Thank you. I was interested to read about this. I knew the Japanese Canadian Legacy Project was happening and that it's a very significant project. And I see the grant numbers beside it. And I'm wondering, did that come with some support for your core staff and function? Or was that,
No, it's mainly operational funding towards.
okay? Because I think that these are really significant projects, this big Japanese Canadian Legacy Project, for example. And kudos to the
Yeah.
organization for having the capability to that kind of project and taking it on. And hearing that kind of level of additional work doesn't come with any core funding, it's helpful. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from our delegation? Councilor Morris.
Well, I guess, I can see the value of the whole thing, and I'm quite positive about that. But if we didn't get the grant, then what happens?
We've been in the same position we have been in the last four years. You know, we're always playing catch up, and it's, you know, when I first started, before we hired Kathy, we had one person doing everything. It was mainly volunteers, really. That's how our organization started from 1967. And so we had one person at $19. Then Kathy came on board. We paid her up at 25 to reflect what she wanted. And then it was a lot of work. So she wanted to do more of the curator. So we hired somebody to be, archivist as well. But so curator got basically 2/3 of the hours, archivist 1/3. When our archivist left us, Kathy wanted to take on the archivist role. So we encouraged her because it was certainly growth. But she took her curator hours over to the archivist. So that left the curator. So every time we had any kind of increase in funding, we're constantly trying to get more hours and and when we hired a new curator, we were paying them $20 an hour. So there was a discrepancy in the two positions. So with every increment, we've been increasing the pay. Unfortunately, it's been a long time since Kathy's had, and I'm talking, probably in excess of 15 years. So we're in this, I was hoping to get in 2022 to get an increase as well as the BC Gaming, and we're falling flat. And that in itself is just causing a lot of stress.
So basically, we're asking people to do a full-time job for nothing.
Well, not nothing, but I know what you're saying. Yeah. Just with the book project, that included, because we got that as well, that included pay for Kathy to work those extra hours, but not at a lower pay rate.
And the Japanese project is largely building something and
Yeah.
the cost of building and the volunteers building, or is there actually some funding there for you?
There is some funding available. I don't have, Adam's leading the project, don't have all the details exactly, all the labor that's going into it, but there is some consultation as well.
So not a lot of time required from the archivist or the curator with respect to that.
Well,
Other
we're all putting in, yeah, we've got a committee on that, so it's board members. We've put in a lot of hours for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Giddey.
So, when, first of all, I think I'm really most happy about, your working through the process in terms of taking over and helping with the Heritage Commission and that combination of the Heritage Preservation Association and the Art Museum and Archives.
Right.
That is a massive, huge, very welcome first step.
Yes.
So I think that that's all the work that you've done on that is fantastic.
Yeah.
I also think that when Sarah Haxby left the community school coordinator's position, that the junior curators and some of the other programs that she was heavily involved with, Heritage Days in February and things like that. Is that something that Kathy and has been able to pick up, or is that something that has to get dropped?
That is, I know, I don't know if it happened this last year, but I do know that it was something they were very involved with, but I don't know if it's happened this last year. I know it has happened in previous years.
It's a lot of work, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of work for sure. And we can't hear it. It's Sarah Haxby. That was her baby for sure. So it might have been dropped. But I think for sure Kathy's has been involved quite a bit.
Right. So in terms of succession planning, if Kathy is getting paid for 33 hours and working 60, then it would be very hard to fill the shoes.
Not seeing any further questions or comments, just from my seat, very appreciative to have you here today, Mr. Forbes. I think the Museum and Archives is a very interesting organization to me because it's really has a passionate sort of stewardship and is the custodian for our historical and cultural and societal records on the island. And the ability that I've seen for the Museum and Archives to tell those stories as well and put them together in presentations and exhibits that serve me certainly as a resident of the island when I came to the island and understand better as to the lineage that I'm stepping into, but also any visitors that come to Bowen Island. Has such a unique history and a unique heritage to it that the Museum and Archives has done an admirable job of stewarding it. I'm certainly in favor of having a look at the core funding agreement. It does seem like, given that storytelling and custodial role for these historical and heritage and societal records of the island, that it does feel like something that would traditionally be in a municipal role or municipal department. So I would encourage you to work with our staff and our CFO as we develop the budget and see what comes up. I really appreciate the laying out of all of the initiatives that are being undertaken by the Museum and Archives. I think that makes an easier case to start assigning dollar figures to, okay, well, what is this going to cost? What do we want to see as a municipality? What does the Museum and Archives want to take on? Obviously there's always budget pressures, so I don't think we're in a place to say, we're going to accept this or not accept this, but I'll be curious to see how this shakes out of the budget process and what we can do to support the Museum and Archives moving forward. Awesome.
Process question.
Yeah.
We don't normally respond or pass any resolutions after we've had a delegation. But I guess, how does this get into the budget process?
I think a simple motion to refer to staff would be
And
Would be
then
appropriate
the other question, I just wanted to clarify, if I understood Rob correctly, this budget does not include cost for the time of actually acting as a commission. Heritage Commission, taking on all those roles.
No, this wasn't,
Yeah, so this is just the,
separate.
to continue operating as they've been operating. So, I would like to refer this request to staff and the budget process.
Moved by Council Morse, seconded by Council Fast. Any further discussion or debate on the motion? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye, in favor.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Jurgensen, and that carries unanimously. Thank you very much for taking this.
Thank you much.
And moving on to our consent agenda, I will look to council for any items they would like to pull from the consent agenda today.
Number 112.9, please. Jenny Bontemore.
Okay. Any other items? Councilor Lee.
12.3 and 12.7, what do I think you can do them together?
Further items? Last call, not seeing any. Can I have a motion to? And I'm gonna pull 12 point. No, Tim already pulled, or Council Waker already pulled. So I'll look for a motion to adopt the consent agenda, please. Moved by Councilor Getty, seconded by Councilor Saunders. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 That carries unanimously. Moving on to items that have been pulled from the consent agenda, we have 12.3 and want to do 12.3 and 12.7 together?
Yes.
Okay. Well, so let's just start with 12.3 then, as it's a single item, so we'll go over to you, Councilor.
So we've got all these letters about Bill 216, and I think a lot of them relate to the situation we have here. Notably, the city of Grinnell and another one. Just being very concerned about a blanket approach to having professional organizations be allowed basically to approve projects. And I don't know that we've had a discussion about this in our, we haven't written a letter. So I think maybe we should refer this to staff and have a discussion, have a report discussion on what our reaction, you know, whether we agree with all these or whether we see ourselves as different.
I'm certainly open to having that discussion. It's been discussed at the Metro Vancouver table. I signed on to a letter of Metro Vancouver mayors that was led by Mayor Early and Burnaby, expressing opposition to Bill 216. Yeah, I don't believe the province should be curtailing the ability for municipalities to get their own independent professional advice on development proposals. I'd be happy to have that conversation, whether the council would like to see it or not, we can add it to a future meeting.
You need a motion.
I'm going to go to Councilor Getty first, just to honor the speakers list and then rolling over process from there.
I think there was something on our agenda, when this first came out, just after the UPCM back in November, and I think we received either a copy of it from the minister or something, and there was a time limit in terms of when people could respond. I believe it was either the end of November or the end of December, so I think we might be outside the timing, so if perhaps it would be helpful to send off some sort of a placeholder to the minister saying that we've received all this correspondence. We haven't had an opportunity to have a detailed discussion on our agenda. We'd like to send in some sort of late reaction to it. If they would be give them a heads up that whether or not they would welcome it. they're not, the time limits have totally held the inspection down in the back of the committee or something, then I think that we're running late, and I think that we should give them that we do want to have a discussion about it.
Well, I think that's the point that a lot of these letters are making. They're asking for a discussion, they're asking for consultation. So I think we could still write a letter and just say that, you know, we'd like to jump on the bandwagon.
At the same time, get some help from staff.
Yeah, it is a unique bill. It's a private member's bill, so it didn't come through the cabinet. It arose through a private member's bill that's been working its way through the legislature. So from a process standpoint, we could either put this on a future agenda for discussion, or if there's a desire for council right now to have the mayor send a letter on behalf of council to express opposition subject to consultation with the municipality, we could do that as well. Get it off the docket, but I will leave it to the will of council.
UBCM has been providing input on that, and I just went on to the website. They got an extension for local governments and the public to provide comment, but the extension was to January 6th. So the deadline was originally December 2nd. But UBCM has responded and suggested recommending against the bill, and so they have made a few submissions with respect to it. So the idea of maybe just sending a letter saying that, you know, we're supporting the positions taken by UBCM or something. Or Metro.
I think the intention the province in terms of what they're after here is they're trying to remove roadblocks and delays. And certainly, you know, I think we support that, but they've done it in a pretty heavy-handed manner and without much consultation. And I think, so I still, notwithstanding that even the extension has passed, I still think this calls for a conversation. And I don't know, you know, how that gets convened, but I guess I don't think they're going to be consulting every municipality individually. But there needs to be some back and forth. There is a benefit at times for professional body to approve things. But I think what the concern here is that municipalities in their development approval process are not going to be given the opportunity to say, well, wait a minute, this doesn't quite meet the test for us. So I don't know what the answer is here, but I think some kind of conversation between council staff and the province and maybe looking to the leadership of the UBCM because they've jumped right on it. So I think that'd be a good idea.
Yes.
Yeah, just on this point on the bill here, it's in addition to UBCM, some of the big lower mainland municipalities have put in very detailed submissions on this. I encourage councillors to look at the submission, the report that the city of Coquitlam put in. It's very comprehensive and has some really well-grounded logical arguments in that. And you know, given this complement of engineering staff we have, and the fact that these large municipalities have a lot more horsepower and have really looked into this into detail, I think our best role here is one of supportive and trying to keep the price of what's being submitted, and some of those discussions happening amongst the city managers and the CAOs. So my suggestion is more of a supportive role instead of a leadership role, because I don't think we're going to be adding anything to the conversation that hasn't already been put forward by these larger municipalities.
Perhaps the motion received at this point, and See what comes.
Make a motion to receive.
So, move to receive, is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Morse. Any further discussion? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that carries unanimously. Then over to you for 12.7, Councillor Wake, which is the letter from Mayor Sid Tobias, Town of Royal, regarding additional review of provincial housing laws, Bill 44, 47, 13, 15, and also M 216.
Right, and I really only suggested that because it had M216 in there, so I don't have any comments on the others.
I do have a comment on this one, just with regards to Bill 44, 47, 13, because again, this has also been hotly contested at Metro Vancouver. And both the public as well as council may have seen a press conference that was held by 16 of the 21 Metro Vancouver mayors that requested the province repeal the housing legislation. In that case, I opted not to sign on to that letter, as I think given our position within the Alliance Trust, as well as a small municipality that is under some of the population max or minimums for that legislation, it didn't feel appropriate to sign on to that letter without consulting council and consulting community. So I've been asked whether I was a part of that press conference, and I was not. I figured I'd let the larger municipalities duke that out, and if we had any response to the provincial housing legislation, we would have that discussion here. My own position is that it would probably be more worthwhile to advocate to the province for legislative amendments to what appears to be some of their signature legislation, and work with the province as opposed to just a flat out demand that the province repeal with this. That'll go to the speakers list, but Councillor Getty, followed by Councillor Best.
So this particular letter is asking whether or not other municipalities would join View Royal in launching a judicial review.
Yeah.
The judicial review is not about a repeal or any attack at this point on the actual legislation, but the process to get there. And I think that is of some interest in terms of whether the province exceeded its authority in reshaping, you know, municipal land use and public hearings and some of the specifics of different parts of that legislation. And I think that could be of some interest to us and to the municipalities broadly. And, you know, whether or not we know enough about it at this point to say that it would be a good idea to join in an expensive litigation. I think that we need to have some discussion sorted that. So if we have concerns about some of the aspects that they brought in terms of process and limiting the ability, particularly around public hearings, I think that you know, we should possibly get some legal advice in terms of what are the liabilities and expense or, you know, projected expenses in terms of getting to litigation like this. And judicial review is, you know, an argument without evidence. Basically, it's not an expensive process for most people. That it's an appeal from a judicial review, or a judicial review is an appeal from an administrative decision. So it's all paper. But I think that it's, you know, something we should consider. Especially because we like public hearings.
Councillor Best.
I think we should just receive this letter. This is the 12.7 we're talking about right now, right? And move on. I actually think the province has to act on the housing crisis, and they've acted on it. And we've responded to it, and I'm not interested in putting resources towards or joining with municipalities that are asking. Well, I don't know. This doesn't seem like something that we could really contribute to in a useful way. I think we can just follow what happens. Other people are taking on this this work, but I don't see a role for Long Island municipality in this, so I won't be supporting any motion outside of receiving it for information.
I'll make a motion to receive.
Okay, moved to receive by Council White, seconded by Council Morse. Any further discussion? Not seeing any, I will call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Council Jurgensen in opposition. Motion carries with Council Jurgensen in opposition. And over to you, Councilor Getty, for item 12.9, letter from 10P Jenny Kwan, Vancouver East regarding Bill C-223, the No More Loopholes Act dated December 8th, 2025.
So this is way outside our jurisdiction. It's a private member's bill that Ms. Kwan has introduced into the House of Commons, and I'm not sure how far it's been, but it's basically making a statement that we need to be very cognizant in terms of what it is that we're exporting and to who and what it's being used for. She wrote this originally in the context of the arms shipments to Israel around the Gaza. But it's, to me, in terms of everything that's been in the press more recently, it has everything to do with what's happening with ICE in the States. And I would, I'm certainly supportive of her efforts personally, and I think that it might be of some interest to her to be encouraged by other communities. Other than just taking a little bit of a step.
I'm not clear on what we're getting to then. Are we still talking we're just receiving or something further than that?
I'm suggesting that we send a letter to Ms. Kwan saying that we support in principle what she's trying to do in terms of having more information about at least somebody paying attention to military exports.
Okay, thanks. And I do have an opinion on that. For me, I agree with you that the legislation is primarily an Israeli thing originally, and it may have morphed now with ICE, which I understand. That proposed legislation, in my mind, it's a not very subtle portrayal of Israel as a perpetrator of genocide and war crimes, and I pretty much categorically reject that. I find historically this member's antipathy towards Israel is pretty well documented over some period of time, and in my mind, it's not supported by any facts. I'm quite happy to say, yeah, let's just accept receipt for information, because I recognize that a lot of people don't agree with me on a lot of things, so that's fine, and I'm open to other interpretation things. So I'm happy to receive it, but I would not want to go any further than that.
Summers? I would be reticent to support a letter like this for different reasons. I think as Councilor Getty stated in opening comments, this falls far outside of our jurisdiction. It's interesting, this is a member of Parliament, the first that we've heard from them, and at the same time, I know that my colleagues in Metro Vancouver and at the Mayor's Council on Regional Transportation, we have been asking senior levels of government for help and relief on things like housing, healthcare, schools, public transit, and we haven't heard much from our federal counterparts, be it MP Kwan here or the Pacific Liberal Caucus or anybody on any of those issues that tangibly affect municipalities. So for this to be our first real advocacy at a federal level, I think it misses the mark really of what is in our program as a municipality. But potentially color the waters a little bit in our relationship with our federal counterparts. Councilors.
It's outside of our bailiwick, I think, the particular topic. So I'm not sure that we should be doing anything more than receiving it for information. All move that we receive. Correspondence.
Moved by Council Morse. Seconded by Council Wade. Any further discussion on the motion? Council Wade.
I just want to agree with what's been said about this being outside our zone of influence. I mean, nothing we're gonna do is going to affect this. And there's, I don't think anybody's gonna be consulting with us on it, so you know, the expression, think globally, act locally. Well, we can't really act on this one, so.
Not seeing any further discussion. I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 All opposed, raise your hand, say nay. Nay. So that carries with Councillor Saunders in opposition.
To receive, that was a motion to receive.
I understand that.
Okay. I was just making sure I
Thank you.
hadn't missed something.
And that moves us through the consent agenda, moving on to business arrival per minute, 6.1, Islands Trust Council Bylaw 183 policy statement referral. We have Xerxes Al, one joining us here today. Our manager, Pani Dewan, and Daniel Martin, providing support.
Yeah, thank you, your worship. I'm gonna introduce the unstressed policy statement draft response. With the council comments incorporated. So just fresh everyone, so at our October council meeting, staff introduced the island stress policy statement and a request for rural response. At the November meeting, this was presented at a committee of whole. And then council provided comments to staff to draft to do a draft response. Staff have incorporated comments from council on the draft policy statement. The draft response is organized in the general comments as well as specific comments on individual policies in the policy statement. Noted themes in council's comments were like need for clarity of language and concerns with like differing interpretations. Certainly like language, like differentiating the roles and responsibilities between local trust communities and the island municipality, and suggestions for clarity and expansion of the implementation section of the policy statement. Council has potential responses in addition to the proposed referral response. Council could send the draft response as is, or we could add conditions, delete comments, and add recommendations to the draft policy statement for information, or recommend that we don't recommend approval. There's also an alternative to send the mayor's letter instead of staff's draft response. Staff are happy to answer any questions. We also have staff from Islands Trust that'll answer questions on the proposed Island Stress policy statement.
Thank you to the planner. I will look to council for any questions, comments, changes, amendments, thoughts, points, perspectives, paradigms. Councilor Pratt. Wow.
Thank you. I'm not going to provide any paradigms. I was pleased with the response that I saw at the end of the package that staff proposed to send to Islands Trust. It was mostly clarification requests as far as I could see, but there was also, I was really happy to see right in the very last paragraph there that the draft Islands Trust policy statement strongly aligns with the various BIM master plans, our master plans. So that shows that we're so far moving along together in a parallel towards preserve and protect. It was good. Concerns about vagueness and clarity. I agree. And what I like is that you've been really clear in saying where is the clarity needed. What I missed in here was the concerns about the implementation. Where was that?
I probably should have noted this. There have been some, when council has provided some, comments that, there were issues with, the implementation section of the policy statement. Could add, statements that are more clear that than, concern from council members.
Is that, would that be referring to which policies do we refer to the Islands Trust?
Yes.
Which we don't? Oh, okay. Thank you. That answers my question.
Thank you, Councilor Past. Councilor Morse.
Few questions. On the first comment, their request that gaps in data should be identified. Are those identified where we think there are gaps in data somewhere? I mean, what are you meaning by that?
The gaps in data we're referring to, mapping on cultural sites,
So how are they gonna know what gaps in data we're talking about if we don't actually spell it in?
Through the chair, I mean, we discussed this with Islands Trust last week, and so what the comment is really about is about where there are policy directives that say, you know, like something needs to be mapped or something needs to be shown. And sort of the question is, well, does that mean, is the assumption that the municipality should be providing that data and then responding based on the data, or is it something that the Islands Trust says, we'll provide the data on that and then you have to follow, you know, make sure you're not harming. So sort of where the responsibility lies for, so that providing the gaps in data, saying what don't we have, and then it's almost whose responsibility is it to make sure that the data is there so that we can follow the directives of the policy.
So where it says which responsibility rests with, so maybe that's part of my confusion. Is whose responsibility is it to provide the data would be clear. And then when you were talking throughout, the word Islands Trust is used. But the Islands Trust isn't an entity. There's three entities. There's Islands Trust Council, the local trust committees, the Bowen Island Municipal Council, and the Islands Trust Conservancy. So when you're referring to Islands Trust, do you mean the Islands Trust Council?
yes.
So maybe we should say Islands Trust Council. And by local communities, is that the local trust areas or is that the local trust areas and Bowen Island municipalities?
Through the mayor, there were some of the comments did point out that like there was a lack of clarity on like what the policy statement means when referring to local communities. Then it's not so clear that whether it's referring to local trust communities or municipalities.
So the policy uses the word local communities.
Yes.
Okay, so the comment is, what do you mean by local communities?
Yes.
Small typo in C, which I'll tell you about later. And second page 2, specific policies, and you're referring to part 3, goal 2, little dog D, policies 3.25 and 3.26. And the potential of hunting and trapping on Bowen. Is it the potential or is it the encouragement of hunting and trapping on Bowen? I mean, I read that policy statement to be encouraging hunting and trapping. And I don't think they should be encouraging it, given that we've got our bylaw that we don't want.
Councillor Morris, we're not sure off the top of our head what the policy refers to. I mean, I think that's just the comment on it is the potential encouragement.
Yeah, I was reading the policy, when I was reading those two policies on the basis that they were encouraging hunting and trapping. We should be addressing them. And then I guess on part 3 in the next page, part 3 goal 4, we said, in L, policy 3.46 could benefit from further discussion. I mean, this is a written document, so you can't discuss it with clarification. So they have further clarification in the document.
Yes, I probably could have rephrased that as clarification. Discussion.
That should have been clarification.
I should have written clarification rather than discussion.
It's written, it's written. And then, okay, Ben has fully, it's unclear, I'm very bottom of that page, goal 5. It's unclear how LTCs would implement policy 3.5.5. I haven't gone back and looked at that. Does that mean that Bowen Island is covered by policy 3.5.5, or it's not clear how we'd implement it too?
Mayor, I believe it's in reference to like how Bowen Island municipality would implement
Yeah.
policy 3.5.1 on fresh
Yeah.
water quality.
So then it should, rather than saying it's unclear how LTCs, because we're not an LTC. So LTCs and island municipalities would implement policy 3.5.5. Managing island municipalities in there.
Yeah, I have no issue with inserting island municipality into
Yeah.
the language.
By leaving this out, it's implying that we know how to do it, but the local companies don't. And the very last paragraph, these BIM plans address a variety of topics such as climate action, housing, cultural and recreational needs, and reconciliation with First Nations. We don't have a master plan for reconciliation with First Nations. It's in our strategic plan.
But through the Merit Care plans, do talk to reconciliation with First Nations. So we may not have a plan specific to that, but that is embedded in many of our plans.
Okay, so what you're saying is that the master plans address topics rather than a specific master plan for reconciliation. Okay. Okay, those are my questions. Oh, and then the comment about the letter from the mayor. That's to go in addition to Xerxes' report, not instead of. That,
I can speak to that when I have the opportunity to speak to it.
thanks.
Not seeing any further speakers, so maybe I'll speak to it now, or Councilor Cahill.
Okay. In reading through your report, I felt like I was at some sort of an advantage, which was in fact a disadvantage. So in the trust and with various committees, we've been going through this line by line, different words and taking things out and working on it endlessly. And we think that we've come down with the first draft that is some sort of guidance. But I think in reading through your report, I think that it's still too big a document. It's still really hard to digest all that's in here. Some 36 pages. And I believe there's still a problem with distinction between what are directive policies and what are advisory policies. So some of the questions or comments that you've raised in terms of how would we interpret this, or how would this apply when it's an advisory policy is quite different from what happens with a directive. And I'm wondering if, when I went through your report, I was thinking, I wonder if it would be helpful to look just at the directive policies first in terms of this is a real problem for Bowen and how, it's too vague and how would we enforce it as opposed to the advisories, because my understanding, and perhaps this needs clarification, is that the advisory policies are more aspirational. And we may not have all the data and we may not have all of the, it's like the freshwater one is a good example. We're just starting to think about how do we assess and take that into consideration. That was the delegation that we had from Conservancy, for instance. So if we could separate out some of this in terms of it's all very well and good to have aspirational, but sometimes apply more directly to other islands in the Federation. In terms of the hunting questions and, we've got overlays here in terms of whether we allow any kind of hunting with, certainly not with guns and some occasionally with bows and arrows and things like that. And there may or may not be, we don't have a strong, active community of Indigenous people here on Bowen, but the history is that it used to be a hunting area. So, in the future, how do we figure that out? And this is saying, take it into consideration, work with the local groups, find out what it is that they need, what they want, what's aspirational, and try to, and that's my understanding what the advisory policies are, which is quite different for other parts, other islands and other parts of the Federation. So, can you help sort out? I mean, I've gone through this and color coded now. That's what I was working on this morning in terms of trying to figure out what the comments are in your report that are identified problems that we might have with an advisory, as opposed to whether or not there's any problems left over with the directive policies. Because I think there's very few. My first impression of it. Probably we don't have very many problems with the actual directive policy. Is that a revision or a refinement that you might use? Would it be fair to say that that would be helpful in terms of distinguishing between the directives and the advisory policies?
Through the mayor, yes, that seems to be like the comments that there's could be there's knowledge of the hierarchy between directive policies and advisory policies.
That was my sort of assumption. But with respect to your letter, Mr. Mayor, I wasn't reading my emails this morning, so I didn't get it. So I'm reading it for half an hour just before the meeting, and there's a fair amount of content in there. It's something that I need to think about. I didn't vote in favor of admitting it as a late item simply because I think it's for information. And it's difficult. I think we're in a difficult situation in terms of, so if there's going to be a suggestion that we send that as opposed to this report, and I think we need to combine them and think about it, spend some time thinking about the content of your report. I think the parts that I agree with and the parts that I probably might not. And I'm a little bit concerned about having to deal with it when I haven't seen it until 5 minutes before the meeting. So I think that this report from staff, if we can polish this and fine tune this, I think that we could come up with something that would be very helpful once it's digested by the whole of Trust Council, which is quite a process. But everybody looks at this in fair amount of detail. So I think we can be helpful. I'm just not sure if either one of these are the way to get there.
Thank you. I have a question for Islands Trust staff, Claire, if she's there, or Jason. This is basically, I want to confirm that the process so far, where the Bowen Island Conservancy and other members of our community have submitted their input, does it now get overlaid with the new? Should they be resubmitting to the Bowen Island Conservancy, for example, be resubmitting now that they've got this draft? And if so, do they need to do that before February the 2nd?
Yes, your worship, am I okay to answer?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, thank you. All correspondence received on the project to date is posted to the Islands 2050 program page on the Islands Trust website, so there's no need to resubmit. It's all there and available to the trustees to review at any time they wish. The new draft, of course, is a different version than what was previously commented on, so it would be prudent probably for groups to take another look and see if it changes the input that they have previously submitted. And they could resubmit to advise Trust Council if there's anything new or different that they'd like to comment on. So I think Trust Council would welcome hearing from them again.
Thank you. I saw that there's a nice email came out today, sort of saying that here's the survey, get your input in before February 2nd. So maybe can I ask, is this something staff could forward out to the community, and including maybe a note to community groups might want to have a look and let the Trust Council know if there's anything, if they have any new comments, something like that?
Certainly, I'll take that back to our communication and engagement team, and we'll take a look at whether that's the best way to promote that engagement. We are really encouraging everyone to come in through the survey and provide comments through that method, but Trust Council is welcoming correspondence as well. Certainly, we could always reach out to some of the groups that we know, like the conservancies that have been really engaged to date, and ask them to contribute. And yeah, certainly we'll take a look at who's commented previously and make a bit of a plan if you like.
Thank you. I just don't think the idea of the February 2nd deadline and the survey is on the radar of groups that are involved in big projects and did things earlier. Thank you very much. And if you can coordinate with Sophie or our staff somehow, that would be great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And secondly, I just want to let the mayor know, I haven't read your letter at all. I didn't know it was there until Judy told me just before the meeting.
Yep.
So it was a late.
Sure.
So, okay, thank you.
And maybe I'll start speaking to that now. So just, for everyone's assurances, the contents of my letter is no different than the pieces that I expressed when this came to council previously. And is entirely consistent with the written feedback that I circulated to council and staff as part of the preparation for today's meeting. And in reading the agenda and the staff report for today, I appreciated the dive into some of the technical aspects and line by line policy aspects that staff has collated and provided feedback on. However, some of the larger concerns that I have philosophically with the document and how it affects governance still remain, and I believe that those needed a finer point. And just for clarity, the letter is very clear that it's coming from my seat as the mayor, that it's not endorsed by council, and as a result, I'm not seeing, I've put it on the agenda to seek council feedback into the draft of this letter, but I'm certainly not looking for approval to send it unless everybody would like to sign it and agree. So that's not something that is here at this meeting. I think it does bear repeating some of the themes of the letter that I've articulated, and I had conversations with Chair Patrick and Vice Chair Elliott over the last little bit about some of the content of it as well. Because I think there are long-term, when I wear both the hat of Bowen Island Municipality Mayor, but also just as a member of the trust, I look at the trust area more broadly. I think there are some frictions that this current draft of the policy statement contains that needs more clarity. So, the big themes that I have in the letter that I provided, and I'll leave you to review the narrative of it, is first that the Islands Trust policy statement is a statutory document. So it's a document that is laid out in the Islands Trust Act that must be drafted by the Islands Trust, passed by the Islands Trust, and any of its bylaws cannot be in variance with the policy statement. And so the challenge here with the policy statement as I read it is that there is a distinguishing between values and advisory policies and directive policies, although in practice, many of these elements, as I read the policy statement, use similar language and are open to wide interpretation. So the wide interpretation of this policy statement, I think, is incredibly problematic. Within the directive policies, which should be prescriptive, there's terms such as minimize, consider, what's appropriate, even limiting the scale of development, or cumulative effects are not defined in a way that provides measured or consistent guidance. And the issue with that is that successive executive committees and trust councils could interpret the policy statement as it's written in very different ways. And you see that in municipal governments and provincial governments and federal governments where there's an election brings in a whole paradigm shift, from one term to the next. And Bowen Island has certainly seen that as it's swung between sort of ecological considerations and development considerations. And this policy statement, I'm not sure is robust enough to withstand those governance shifts. So even if we take the term limit the scale of development, for example, what does that mean? Is it, okay, we're going to limit development flat out, that we're not going to allow building across the trust area, and that's shifts more into the ecological or even reconciliation views? Or does an executive committee and a trust council take control that says, we'll approve we'll limit development as long as it's not over 10 stories, right? So these are the two extremes that could be interpreted under the existing policy statement. So it has to be able to withstand these governance shifts, including scenarios where decision-making could tilt either strongly towards aggressive development interests or conversely near prohibitive interpretations of environmental and cultural protection. And a statutory policy framework should constrain discretion and not amplify it. And that's, in my view, what this existing policy statement does. The secondary challenge with the policy statement is this reliance on a non-statutory implementation plan. So there's reference in the policy statement that places some considerable weight or earmarks or creates an opening for a future implementation plan that's going to operationalize the interpretation, the evaluation, and the monitoring of the policy statement. And while that implementation planning is valuable, it really raises a structural concern. First of all, that the Islands Trust policy statement is a statutory document that's enshrined in legislation, and the implementation plan is not a statutory document. So those two need to be harmonized so that the clarity of direction, the clarity of interpretation comes from the statutory document, not from a set of guidelines or an implementation plan that can be short-circuited by an executive committee or a trust council of the day. The next piece is that there's an equivalency made, an equivocation that's made in the policy statement. And I think this is a function of many of the policies that we see in the trust where Bowen Island's distinct status as a municipality is equivocated with the functions of a local trust committee and a local trust area. And I am not sure if that's entirely true or always a good way of looking at it. We know that as a municipality, we're a fully constituted municipality. We have statutory responsibilities under the Community Charter and the Local Government Act. We deliver a range of services in addition to what the trust provides, including infrastructure and housing. And we're directly accountable to residents through municipal government. So I am not sure if the analysis has been fulsome enough to really distinguish between what does it mean to be an island municipality, a fully constituted municipality within the Islands Trust, and what that means, given that we have to comply and we have to reconcile trust policy with provincial housing legislation, emergency management obligations, service delivery, and fiscal responsibility. There's a differential there that I believe the Islands Trust policy statement, which it can do under its statutory authority under section 15, to explicitly acknowledge, clarify, and delineate that distinction between a local trust committee and a municipality. Housed in this, that I've also pointed to in my letter, is that given the wide latitude of interpretation in the existing, the draft of the Island Trust policy statement, is that it doesn't provide predictability for all users of the planning system. So Islands Trust at its core is a planning entity, and it's relied on by trust bodies, by local trust areas and their committees, but also by Indigenous governing bodies, by regional districts, by community organizations, by conservation groups, and by landowners and proponents. And all of those groups need a predictability and a stability of interpretation across terms. So when I talk about being able to, the interpretation of the policy statement to be able to withstand governance changes, it's not just for us as a municipality, it's not just for the trust itself, but it's for all users of the planning function of the trust, whether you're an Indigenous body or a conservation group or a developer. If you are putting forward any major project, as we know within the municipality, can take years, it can stretch multiple terms. And if there's an uncertainty as to how a policy statement is going to be interpreted and applied from one term to the next, that provides an interpretive instability for all of those groups that are using the planning function of the trust. And sort of the last thing that I have is just alignment with the object of the trust. So Section 3 of the Islands Trust Act establishes the trust object as to preserve and protect the trust area and its unique amenities and environment for the benefit of the residents of the trust area and British Columbia. And I think an unasked question is, given that the draft island policy statement contains numerous directives that extend into areas traditionally within municipal jurisdiction, it talks about housing delivery, transportation, waste and water servicing, economic development, community services. And so while those policies may intersect with land use planning, the breadth and prescriptive nature of some of these directives raise questions about alignment with the trust statutory object and how that collides with municipal authority. So how that those policy statements affect what has traditionally been legislated statutorily by documents like Community Charter and the Local Government Act. So all of this, just in terms of the interpretation of it, I think there needs to be more clarity. There needs to be an ability to define success. So in 20 years, if the Islands Trust policy statement succeeds, what does that actually look like across the island, or across the islands? And I think when we talk about development and density and conservation and ecological stewardship, if that was mapped out, we would have some much better definitions of what all of these terms within the policy statement mean, and then they would be able to have some resilience between terms of the executive committee and the trust council. So that's what my letter states. And again, I'm very appreciative for this work. I believe that the trust statement does need to be modernized. It does need to be brought into a contemporary perspective. However, my fear from a governance standpoint is that it adds a number of doors of fuzziness between municipalities, between users of the trust's planning functions, between residents of the trust, and the definition of success and the interpretation of what some of these policies mean are just so wide open that the interpretation can zigzag from one term to the next. So that's where I'm at with it. That's what my letter says. Happy to take feedback, and it's you know, it's not designed to be contrary or a contradiction to what staff has put together. It's more of an expansion on it and a discussion of the overall generational governance of the trust as it moves into its aspirations for 2050. Not so fast.
Thank you for explaining your letter, which I still haven't read. So excuse me if I'm fuzzy. I like your comment about adding doors of fuzziness because there have been lots of discussions at Trust Council and in the various committees and meetings. I believe one of the earlier drafts used the word shall, for example. And then, and this was even the previous term, it was changed to shall strive to, for example. And so I welcome, I'm looking forward to reading your letter. I welcome any comments about making the wording stronger and clearer. Thank you.
Councilor Wick?
Thank you. I've really, I was also late to your letter, but I did go through it, and in comparing it to the staff report, I mean, they both got real value. But a question I would have is, are we going to actually suggest changes, or are we going to point to the areas where we think there needs to be change and expect trust to change it?
I would look at our planners, from my reading of the feedback process, there's 4 checkboxes that we can use. One is approved for these reasons. One is approved subject to these conditions. Or a check that it doesn't affect us, or a check that we don't approve. So my sense is that, you know, I can look to some of the Islands Trust staff here online what the process is, or our trustees can inform us, but that's my understanding of where we're going with this.
Through the chair, I don't have much to add other than I think, you know, I know that the trust is trying to coordinate feedback from many different sources. So in that sense, having the general feedback is just invaluable to retain. When you go to revise your first reading version, these are ones that you should use to look at the whole thing, like general comments. We're not going to point and say like, you know,
Change this word.
change this word on this page or whatever. We're saying in general, when you're revising, keep these things in mind. I think that's a value.
Councilor Getty with the hand up earlier, then go to Councilor Chris.
So I find, I remember when we had I think you made these kinds of comments at the committee of the whole meeting. And I remember at that point that I intended to go back and look at that recording so that I could take notes. And so this letter basically is a clarification, I think, of a lot of what you said then. And I find it really valuable, and but I want to have some discussions with I'm not sure, Jason, are you a director, but staff with the trust in terms of feedback. I'm curious whether or not there's been some assessment from the minister. Ultimately, if this gets through second and third reading with the trust, it has to go for approval with the minister. And some of these questions that have been raised by yourself, Mayor Leonard, is stuff that I think the ministry is going to be very much considering and looking at. Whether or not, you know, we remain the only island municipality, or whether there's others that show up in the future. This is something that we need to sort out. And I think that you've raised some really valuable points, but I'm hesitant in terms of I want some opportunities to understand better what it is that you're thinking and what we can do as the Trust Council in terms of changing some of this language and being more precise and being more helpful so that we don't get into problems in the future. I understand the relevance and the importance of, you know, if there's a massive change in the political direction of some of the directors or some of the trustees, that it can there might be some gaping holes in this that from my perspective need to be closed up. But yeah, if we're at the point of sending A or B or both to the minister, to the trust as feedback, we can do that, but I would like to have more conversations in terms of once it gets to Trust Council, being able to understand and explain and be part of a discussion in terms of helping people understand. So, you know, this isn't the last opportunity. Obviously, it's been going on for 9 years. I'm sure, hopefully we'll get it through. That's the objective, but you know, I think that the whole business about the implementation plan is very clear. It's been very hard to get through the content of the original document. So yeah, we haven't spent a lot of time on that, but you know, that can be clarified. And I think that some of the points that staff and yourself have raised with respect to the language and be more precise. So, I think that the staff report and your letter are very helpful, but I'm not sure that I can support them going out at the present time. I think we do have some more work to do. At the very least, there's not a point glaring, not a typo, but the use of a phrase, whether it's equate or equivocate, right? But that's me being pedantic, so leave you alone on that one. But yeah, I think that I think we've got some really good, helpful input, and we need to sort out. If I'm going to be discussing it at Trust Council, I need more understanding, and I'm not sure how we get there.
Thank you. Great discussion. I think we've got two things going on. One of them is the staff report, which I support as being really useful to other planners at the Islands Trust, because it's mostly asking for clarification. And even some of the questions where there's a little bit, the questions go a little bit beyond clarification. It's still going to be questions that the Islands Trust staff can respond to. And pointing out where clarification is needed, I think is really useful in the terms of the 50 local governments that this draft has been put out to, including regional districts and all kinds of other municipalities, and the 30 First Nations, some of whom are probably looking at it for the first time. So there's tons of other groups. Those are the local governments and First Nations. Then there's all the community groups and the individuals and out there. So I think the staff's response here is really good, and I'm going to move the motion in a minute. The second part, that's sort of the clarification part. The second part is your letter, which I now am understanding as substantive edits rather than clarification edits. And I think, like my colleague, that we need more, we could use more discussion about it. Certainly us trustees could. But I don't even think it's on the agenda for us to, seeing as I haven't read it, it's not on, I won't be moving to add my name to it because I haven't read it. But I would like to move the staff recommendation at 6.1. Is it time for that?
You're good. There's no more speakers in the queue.
Okay. I move that council approve the referral response to the Islands Trust regarding bylaw 183 and direct staff to submit the response prior to Islands Trust February 2026 deadline. So I just removed the word draft from. Okay.
Seconded.
Moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Jurgensen. Councillor Morris.
There were some small comments about sort of some word changing and clarifications. That mean they're struck down.
I believe they would be, so we're looking at the response. If we wanted to make amendments to it, we could do it as part of this process. Other specific.
Well, aside from the typos, I did have. It's not thought either. Things like the wording local communities. Should be local trust committees and island municipalities. Discussion should be changed to clarification. And island municipalities should be included in one particular section. So it should be local trust committees and island municipalities within all 3.5.
So let's go back to the start, Council Morris, and then we'll just rip through these to see by unanimous consent since.
Sure,
I think-
or staff are listening too if people speak up.
Yeah, but I think these are not super substantive to the actual intent of the draft, so let's go back to the first one, just.
Okay, so general comments, point one, Islands Trust should be Islands Trust Council. And local communities should be local trust committees and island municipalities.
Okay, so just pause there. I'm gonna look to staff to see if they captured that, and then I'll just look to do this by unanimous consent.
Through the chair, I was just gonna highlight that the draft response has lettering, and so Councillor Morse wants to refer to the.
Okay, well, I'm on page one of the draft response, point one. 1A. Point 1A.
So, through the chair, we have no concern, I think, for that.
So is there any objection to making that language change? Not seeing any, so we'll change that by unanimous consent.
So further down on page one in C for Charlie, the first sentence requests that changes to be made. I think that the word to should be deleted. So that changes be made to the language.
Okay, see if thumbs up from the planners. Any objection to making that change? Not seeing any, we'll do that by unanimous consent.
Okay, I'm now on specific policies. Page 3 of the report, part 3, goal 4, item L. Policy 3.46, but benefit from further clarification of what restrict development rather than discussion.
Any objection to making that change? Council not seeing any, that by unanimous consent.
And at the bottom of that page, little I, Sam has the following comments about the implementation of goal 5. Insert the word island municipalities after local trust committees.
It's unclear how local trust committees not only municipalities do implement policy 3.55. Any objection to that change? Carries by unanimous consent.
Is staff clarified what they, yeah.
Okay. Council Getty.
Yeah, one.
Yep.
Back on the first page, 1B, it's gonna be equivocate, not equate. Looked up a definition if you want. Equivocate implies ambiguous language so as to conceal the truth or avoid committing oneself.
The Islands Trust policy statement frequently equates LTC with non-municipalities. Any objection to that change?
Good catch.
Okay, so that carries by unanimous consent. Any other changes? Not seeing any, so we're back to the main motion, which was to, when I scroll back up in the document, approve the referral response to the Islands Trust regarding bylaw 183 and direct staff to submit the response prior to the Islands Trust process February 26th.
Do we need to say amendment at the meeting? Just,
We just already made all the amendments.
okay.
So this is considered the referral response because we didn't include the word
So the
draft.
updated response will be attached to the minute. People will know what we actually.
I will direct that to the corporate officer.
The materials that are in the agenda not changed. I can reflect the amendments we've made during this meeting in the text of the minutes.
Yeah, so some people will change.
Okay, not seeing any further discussion on this item, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that carries unanimously. And sorry, Mr. Martin, and or to the planners, when do you anticipate sending us to the trust?
The chair, we revise and send, yes, by the end of this week. Yeah.
By the end of this week, okay. So I will take feedback and comments and edits on my letter until the end of the week. At which point I will send it to the chair and everybody that's on the CC list. Okay. Yes.
Coming from you.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, back to our agenda. We are on 6.2 council remuneration policy. We have Kristen Watson, our CFO, with us here today.
Good afternoon. Through the mayor, the rest of council, I'm bringing forward the proposed draft council remuneration policy. This is a policy that has come before council on 2 previous occasions. The last time it came forward, council requested some changes to it. They included number 1, language to clarify that extended benefit coverage would be offered to both elected officials and their eligible dependents. Number 2, that annual adjustments be tied to the same adjustment provided to exempt staff as approved by council each year. And thirdly, that a requirement that the policy be reviewed prior to the incoming of the new council term starting in 2030. So those changes have been made to this policy. Staff has also added 1 final clause in the policy, which is number 6. And that is that that's a rescission of the policy that's now in effect. So upon this policy coming into effect, this will effectively rescind the policy that is in place now that governs council remuneration. So with those changes, I do hope that the policy now reflects the wishes of council for remuneration, and this is to take effect upon the incoming council term in November 1st, 2026.
Thank you to the CFO, Councilor Wade.
Thank you. Just for clarification, help me understand here. Under number 2, the annual adjustments be tied to the same adjustment provided to exempt staff.
Correct.
Exempt from what?
Not part of the bargaining unit, the union.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
I believe Councilor Wade was in the cover page of the report under background number 2. Councilor Getty.
I'm prepared to recommendation on.
Okay, I don't see any other folks in the speakers list, so go ahead. Oh, Councilor Morse.
I just have, which I raised before, the intro and the policy objective. I mean, I really like the policy objective that was in the previous policy over this one. It says remuneration is adequate to attract and retain. Council members are elected, so we have no control over retain. I think we should. Well, I mean, it's the only comment we would control. Yeah. And I do remember that when we first got incorporated, we were talking about incorporation years ago, everybody said, oh, they'll all be applying for a job just because they want a job. So, but you got the word of dedicated group committed to public service in there, but we're elected, so I don't see how we could possibly have a policy that tries to retain.
Look to some CFO with the hand up, and then
This was brought up at the meeting at October 27th. Like, so Councilor Morse, the minutes of that meeting will reflect that, that discussion was had, and there were other council members at the table who specifically supported the retention of that word retained in the policy, which is why it's done.
I didn't have time to go read through and find it.
back over to you, Councilor Getty, for the motion.
So I move that council remuneration policy number 26-01 be approved.
By Councilor Getty, seconded by Councilor Saunders. Any further discussion on this item? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That carries with Councilor Morris in opposition. 6.3 local service area funding policy. With us again is our chief financial officer.
Thank you, Mayor. This policy is a overarching policy as a means to guide the framework for funding local area services, specifically water and sewer services on Bowen Island. This policy first came in front of council September 8th. It was then distributed through electronic means to local service area users who have subscribed to our electronic information systems, as well as being made available on our website for public input. We did get a couple of responses. In summary, we received a specific request to provide local service area users with 30 days notice prior to report presentations. We received a request to expand the scope of the policy to include a framework for financing shared or combined utility systems. And lastly, there were some concerns raised regarding the proposed use of general funds to provide internal financing. So staff comments regarding that feedback, I would add that it is necessary that we stick to our agenda publication deadlines as established in council procedure bylaw in order to make information available to the public. So that 30-day request to have notice, I think, is a little excessive, especially given sometimes some of the tight turnaround opportunities that we have, especially with regards to financial information. Secondly, there is, it's actually on the agenda later today, there is a second policy, which is under development to guide the implementation of specific circumstances regarding a combined or a shared water system. So I believe that those concerns will be addressed in the second policy that will be brought to council for consideration. And lastly, the point of this policy is to set up an expectation around when general funds are used in order to help fund the cost of water systems. There are benefits to seeking to use internal financing rather than always going external. It's faster. It doesn't require that assent of the electors, and it also doesn't then add to the municipality's borrowing limit and reduce that capacity to borrow for other external island-wide priorities. So this policy sets out a requirement to ensure that if internal funds are used, that a repayment plan is established and set up, and it's either made through a council resolution or a bylaw or something that is communicated to the public in that manner. So I believe that those issues were adequately addressed within this policy. And I'm happy to take further questions on it, but it would be my recommendation to council to approve this policy as an overarching local area service funding policy to provide guidelines and an understanding to future councils and future staff.
Councilor Morris.
So I think one of the timings in start the operations maintenance costs on financial plan development. Is there going to be a further policy done that actually lays out in writing how the shared costs and everything are allocated?
It's in the financial plan each year.
Well, you show an amounts, but you don't actually show a detail of, you know, which ones were done and which ones weren't.
It is in the financial plan. And it will be in February 23rd.
All right, I'll look again. Under internal financing, it include repayment terms that are transparent, reasonable. So will repayment terms include interest?
Where that is required. So if the borrowing comes from a statutory reserve fund, it is by law required. And if it's from accumulated surplus or some statutory reserve, there's no legal requirement. So it would be established at that time by that council to make that decision.
And then you talk about in the internal financing by local service area residents' ability to pay. But residents don't pay the taxes, it's property owners.
Well, I would say that residents pay the property taxes through their rent. So I think that residents is.
And I guess the other concern, I guess, with respect to it's going to be done at a committee, presented, the 5-year financial plan will be presented at a committee of the whole. Will the local service areas mailing list be advised of that committee of the whole meeting?
Yeah.
That wasn't talked about in there. And will water system users be able to speak at that committee, the whole meeting to the budget, or is that meant to go just part of the broader consultation, like fill in a form and survey?
They'll be able to speak in accordance with the procedure bylaw established for committee of the whole meetings.
So it isn't just a come and sit and listen and not say anything. And they will be advised of the meeting.
They'll be advised, yeah.
And then one other, in the financial reporting. We used to prepare a balance sheet for each local service area.
Mhm.
Is that consideration?
It's not at this point, no. So I do provide detailed fund balances, which I think is the relevant information, is how much money do they have? The book value of their water systems is probably not as relevant to most people, but certainly how much money is set aside for each fund is, and that's absolutely provided in their financial plan each year.
So the reason I was asking that under financial plan development for a policy that says how things are allocated is to prevent questions like, are the insurance premiums allocated for property insurance premiums allocated on the basis of the value of the assets in each area, or just divvy up?
A replacement value, so it's got nothing to do with their.
No,
book
but
value.
replacement value for each specific area. So it's not all put in one and then just divided by the number of connections.
No.
I don't think the policy could have started.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I thought it made clear, even though I have not been the one attending local area meetings. So thank you. And I'm noticed that you had lots of opportunities to respond on the draft, and you had 5 responses. So thanks for the to the 5 that did respond. And it seems to me like it's been a thorough process, and I'd like to move the motion. Okay.
I will come back to Council Fest. Over to you, Council Gibney.
Okay, so when I'm reading through this and thinking about it, this is what was started with respect to something to do with the sewage local service area.
Anything to do with the internal financing, yeah.
Yeah. But the problem that we had in terms of all of the finances and whether or not this, and the question that went to the ombudsperson in terms of whether or not general funds should be used to fund a local service area. Okay, so this is, it's taken us a while, but this is the recommendation. So if it's not going to be, if it's going through general funds and we're setting up this new policy, then it's, and we're trying to basically, one of the main features is the borrowing limits that are in place from the province, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but those are there so that a municipality doesn't over borrow and put themselves in some sort of financial difficulty. So we don't want to go bankrupt.
Right.
Okay, so then we set it up so that the same amount of money, let's using the sewage district, if I remember correctly, it was something like $7 million. And the local.
It was 1.7 million
Okay,
and 900 was being repaid over time.
that was that question.
Yeah, correct.
But in terms of the final upgrade of the system to handle all the potential development along Miller
Yeah.
and in the cove was something much more substantial. And I believe the number
Yeah.
was 7 million.
Okay, yeah,
Okay, so, and that's something that that local district, given that it, you know, the number of people that are involved, the commercial area, the residential area, that they could never, or it's unrealistic to expect them to afford it.
Yeah.
So on the premise, on the assumptions that the local district can't afford it, that it is something that, we have said that we want to develop Snug Cove and that it's, we're gonna have to have some sort of an expansion with no real discussion in terms of what that $7 million and whether or not we all agree that that should be the extent of the expansion. To set it up through general means that we're still taking on the debt. Either that the general tax base has to put into general funds or put into a statutory reserve fund or community surplus. Some way of getting it from the taxpayer into a fund that can then be used by the local service area. Right? So it's not. What we're avoiding is the maximum that the province would allow in terms of borrowing funds. But the burden on the taxpayer is still that we have to fill up this general surplus. Right?
If council were to pass that bylaw and make that resolution.
So if we try to find a way of getting $7 million, for example, then, and we don't want to go into getting an assent from the local service area and having that borrowing become part of our equation in terms of, you know, what our limits are. Then the money still has to come from it just gets diluted in terms of who's helping to pay for it. The numbers of people increase, so it becomes the general surplus, right? So island-wide.
Well, the money wouldn't be there. So at the end of the day, if you're looking for $8 million to fund a sewer upgrade, you would be taxing for it,
Right,
which council has the authority to
Yes.
tax for.
right. So it's basically spreading the responsibility or the liability for the money to pay for the system onto the whole population, the whole island. Okay. So is there some way of figuring out, and the sewage system is particularly interesting because there's the local service area, the people that are actually in the service area, and that they obviously benefit, all the people at Gates Hill and all of the commercial. And then we've talked about, and there's this idea of the whole of the community benefits from the commercial area having a proper functioning sewage system. Right? So that's why we can justify having the whole population pay for a local sewage area. Local service area. That part of the reasoning?
There are different opinions on that. Some council members may feel that that is a defensible position, and other council members may feel that it's not a defensible position.
Let's assume for the moment that we've got a discussion where that's a defensible position. Has there been some thought, and is there some way of calculating what the percentage of the benefit for the larger population? So that it's, you know, somehow or other, the local service area wants to develop Snug Cove, and this is a major impediment. And they, you know, it's ultimately, well, other than the local housing, that possibly affordable housing, that if it's going to increase the commercial value of the area, so they've got a better functioning, then nothing's going to shut down, that there's, you know, I go and use the washrooms in the restaurants, right? So if I'm paying for part of that service, I get it, but would I be paying part of the whole of the bill?
So-
Is there some equation that we've got that distinguishes?
So Councillor Getty, I think there's a perfect example which has already taken place in this municipality where that conversation was had at the council table, and that was with the previous sewer treatment plant upgrade. The total cost was 1.7 million. Initially, council agreed to fund the entire thing through general reserves. They reviewed that decision. They asked staff to come back with a rationale as to how a portion of that could be reasonably attributed to local service area users and how a portion of it could be attributed to island-wide. Staff fulfilled the request, provided them with a rationale, and council accepted that rationale and supported it. Those decisions have to be made on a case-by-case basis. They are always going to be politically charged and fraught. And what I'm trying to do in this policy is to provide a framework saying, okay, council, if you're going to use internal financing, here's what you need to do. You need to clearly identify how much and if and when and how it's going to be repaid to general funds. We can't draft a policy that's going to specifically give council a rationale to attribute a massive project to island-wide. That's going to be a decision that council's going to have to make at that time. What we have here is a framework for ensuring that if some of it is attributed to island-wide taxpayers, that there's a method and a clear, concise way of ensuring that those repayments are made back to the general fund.
Okay. Well, if you, okay.
Yep.
Okay, so, is there some way of putting into the policy that, if there's, interest that accrues to a statutory reserve fund or that is, somehow or other, an expense, that gets tied in with, you know, the difference that you made, the distinction that you made between the statutory reserve fund and the community surplus funds, where one would not necessarily attract interest costs. That's, I think, an important distinction. And is there some way of creating a policy that takes that into consideration so that the interest is not sure. I have to think that one through in terms of, if it's gonna be an island-wide expense, then obviously the insurance or the interest, if there is any. But is that something that should be part of the policy, do you think?
Well, we could include repayment terms.
Including interest.
And with interest if applicable, because in some cases it doesn't need to be said because there's a statutory requirement to pay the interest. In others, it would be a choice, and again, it would be just one more choice in the decision that was being made in the whole process of coming up with this repayment plan.
Okay, but I think my last point, at some point when we were talking about, and in this, there's grant. I think the general fund includes, general revenues includes property taxes, grants, and non-LSA user fees. So there was some discussion, when we were doing the Blue Water in terms of having, I believe it was a provincial grant, and that we wouldn't just give it as part of the funding, that it became part of a, user pay agreement. Okay, so it seems to me that if that principle was important, that we're not using it for something that is necessarily island-wide, but quite specific to a local service area, that that's a principle that needs to be included. If we're including grants as part of general revenues that doesn't attract interest payments and is not being used for something else that, you know, the Blue Water example was specific in terms of being a particular district as opposed to something like the sewer district, which is more complicated, but is there something in, is there any way of including in this policy that funding that we get that is intended to be island-wide is not interest-free, I suppose, is the problem. In terms of, or it becomes part of a, how do we set it up, Blue Water?
We're gonna pay it back.
Yeah. Is that?
I believe that would be covered off by including the term, include repayment terms, including interest if applicable, that are transparent, reasonable, and structured to minimize financial risk. I believe that would cover that off as well.
Thank you.
Council Morse.
I had assumed all along that the general fund amount that you were referring to would only be the unappropriated surplus. The thought that we would use statutory reserves that were set up for specific purposes and lend them to another fund, sewer fund, to build something, then not have them available, that money available for the statutory reserve that we're saving the money for, is unconscionable in my mind. So I to me, it's only the unappropriated surplus, and unappropriated surplus as of the end of 2024 was only $3 million. So, and we need a certain amount of unappropriated surplus for our working capital. So I guess I was thinking of sort of small loans or whatever, certainly not a loan to fund the whole of the sewer expansion. So if that's what's intended by this policy, and to come up with a number that can do that, then I'm voting no.
Okay, Councillor Fast, or sorry, the CFO first and then Councillor Fast.
I can say definitively that using this as a means to fund an $8 million sewer treatment plant upgrade was not the intent of writing the policy. The policy is to close the loop and make sure that next time something comes up, like the Blue Water example that happened 2 years ago, that we are all on the same page and we have guidance and a framework in which to approve those smaller loans to a local service area and require repayment. To your other point, Councillor Morris, regarding the use of statutory reserves to local service area, it's exactly what happened with the water treatment plant when there was $1 million loaned from the Land Opportunity Reserve Fund to Cope Bay Water in order to complete the plant. And that there's a bylaw and there's an internal loan and an annual payment of $124,000 for 10 years in order to pay that back with interest. So it has happened. It will or potentially may happen in the future. And again, this is why we need to have this policy in place in order to provide the framework to do that going forward.
Now I'm gonna move on to Councillor Fast. The question was answered and that was responded to, and just
She's raised another question.
then.
Okay, put me back on the speaker's list.
Okay, over to you, Councillor Fast.
Thank you. I just, good discussion. I'm noticing that in the, when I was reading it, it seemed to be about local service areas as discrete local service areas with the expectation that they'd be self-funded. But, you know, the island-wide example is something that would potentially happen as has happened in the past, but underlaid by this as sort of a strong foundation of expectation for everybody on the island. So I support this the way it is. I noticed that the 5 people or groups or the 5 responses did focus on, supported the user pay idea. And I like that it's got asset management that's going to be part of the asset management process. And with regard to the bylaw, anything bigger than this, then these local service areas would have to go through bylaw, as the chief financial officer has mentioned, and that always includes a public process. So there should be no surprises and everybody has a chance to have their input. And to me, this is kind of the ground floor of user pay, self-funding, taking care of each local service area's assets and needs, and funding it by the property owners and the taxes that come to that local service area. So to me, this is the ground floor. Anything above this has to go through bylaw and have more, but this sets the base expectation. So now can I read the motion?
I have one comment. So I like the policy. The only piece that I philosophically disagree with is around the use of what would be unrestricted grant funds from other levels of government or from external agencies. So, you know, the example that would come to mind is if we get something again, like the Growing Communities Fund, which is a substantial chunk of money. So let's say we get $2 million. That didn't, you know, and I think the challenge with that money is that it got eaten up by debt for the community center. But if we had like a substantial chunk of money that was in that range again, it would be difficult for me in this chair as a council member to say that we couldn't apply that to a local service area for an improvement that needed to be made. without it needing to be internally borrowed by that service area. Because it is sort of a windfall. It's external money that came in. It wasn't raised by property taxes. And so my belief would be that that type of money, if there is a really necessary project that has to be done in a local service area, that the council could effectively grant it to that local service area. Instead of taking money from the province or from senior government or from an external agency, which we've gotten for free essentially, and then putting into a local service area that then needs to borrow it back for interest. We know the challenges already with project-specific grant funding across our local service areas. An example of that is Eagle Cliff. Eagle Cliff got a grant. We applied for it. My understanding was that it was probably the best project and the most successful grant. But we've heard from the other local service areas, oh, how come we didn't get a grant? How come you didn't advocate on our behalf to get a grant? And that's because we have many of these local service areas. So that would be the only change that I would like to see made, is that if there's unrestricted external grant funding coming in, that can be an exception to this internal financing piece. Because these are major infrastructure projects, and it seems like lending out money that we've received as a grant and that we're getting interest back on from a local service area, it doesn't quite feel as ethical to me as it should. Councilor Morse for a quick rebuttal, and then over to Councilor Getty.
So rebuttal to yours now too. Those monies were lent to the community to be used for the community as a whole. And therefore, if one particular area benefits, then as a service area, then they should be repaying that money.
Sure, but that argument could be made for if you're doing roads in a specific area, if you're doing upgrading.
No,
roads.
because everybody pays property taxes generally for roads.
Right.
And we will all agree or disagree on the priority given to road repairs. The other is if using statutory reserves where the money has been put into those reserves by taxing the community generally to put into the fire equipment reserve or the roads replacement reserve or the infrastructure capital renewal reserve, a parkland acquisition reserve. Those monies were raised from taxpayers, from the general taxpayers, and therefore should only be used for general. So the idea of using statutory reserves or anything other than unappropriated surplus to finance these things is not appropriate.
Councilor Getty, and then we'll look for a disposition on this.
Well, I think the example that you gave is the discussion that we had in terms of that growing community fund and whether or not part or all of that should be connected to Blue Water. So, I think that the policy needs to leave that option available for council to discuss and not necessarily say one way or the other that it should be allowed or disallowed. But I think that that's, depending on the project and depending on size of the area and the ability to pay for something that, if it's a something that turns, into an emergency or something that makes an area inhabitable, then I think that the council has to, be able to work with what is available. But at the same time, I think they have to be able to decide whether or not they're going to. So that was the discussion that we had about Blue Water. So, and we voted in this council, took a position and voted accordingly. And, the next, I don't think that it's fair or reasonable to bind the next council or some other council in terms of, if there were something like a community growing fund that, and we had a windfall that council could prioritize whatever they wanted to spend it on. But, I think that in terms of the community has to clearly understand that this is a broad community benefit that is being used for a small area for these reasons. And that's, the principal position that council took. So if that's what this policy is saying clearly enough, that that's going to be the interpretation, that we've got. I mean, I agree with Councilor Morris in terms of put that on the record.
Yeah.
that, you know, a statutory fund has a statutory element to it. And that, you know, there's, we have to be really, really clear in terms of changing what that money is going to be used for. But that's very different from the community surplus. I just think that we're so heavily taxed, if we start, you know, taxing more heavily for some bigger project, that there's no other possible way that we can fund it, that this allows that, but it's something that needs to be really clearly discussed and understood.
The policy and truly, whether it comes from general fund or whether it comes from a grant, I mean, it all comes from general fund.
Yeah.
If it comes from a grant and it's loaned to a local service area, then it means it's not available to the general fund to use for other purposes. So whether it's coming from municipally generated revenues or whether it's coming from grant revenues, it's still a use of money from the general fund in a local service area. The policy, as it's written, requires that money borrowed from the general fund be repaid. That is the position of some people, and some people believe that council should have some discretion as to whether money borrowed from the general fund should be repaid. So the challenge is, do you want a framework for borrowing money from the general fund? And if so, maybe it just says, if money's borrowed from the general fund, council of the day shall decide on repayment terms, if any. Like, that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing two very clear messages that there needs to be some discretion as to whether those funds are repaid or they must always be repaid. The policy as written says they must always be repaid. So I guess as staff, I'm looking for direction, clear direction from council as to how we want that requirement for repayment to look.
Yeah, from my side, the reason why I mention it is that there's a number, I mean, I would think that the majority of small municipalities out there aren't, I say saddled with, but you know, don't have the overhead of you know, a half dozen local service areas.
Yeah.
Right, and in some respect, it does feel sometimes like we are the Bowen Island Regional District.
Yeah.
With that.
Yeah.
And the reason I use the Growing Communities Fund example is that any of those communities that would receive Growing Communities Fund money, an obvious place to use it is water and waste. And it feels like there's just a governance hurdle that we have where we're hamstringing ourselves from, if we have unrestricted grant money that comes in, because we can't apply for we can't apply 7 times the same grant stream for the project specific stuff. But it feels like if we were one unified water system, you know, whether it was on the east side or the west side of the island, like it was just one LSA or we didn't have LSAs, it would be an obvious place to spend the money. Which is why it feels a little strange to me that for that sort of unrestricted money that we would borrow it out to a local service area anyways, knowing that the projects need to go ahead regardless. So that's the only reason why I bring up these. I'm going to go to Councillor Jurgensen, and then I'm going to look for either a deferral of this item or an actual clear disposition on it as we need to move on. Councillor Jurgensen.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, this whole discussion, I know what I'm going to say next is politically charged on many levels. But I'm inspired by your comments there to wonder out loud whether we are hamstringing ourselves by continuing to have 7 water local service areas rather than one unified one, and whether that conversation needs to be looked at only because I wonder if we're doing more harm than good to ourselves by continuing with the status quo. And maybe I'm wildly off the mark here, and apologies if I am, but I just wonder as to what the pros and cons are of this at this point, and whether this is a discussion we need to revisit.
At some point.
Not
Not this
today.
year. But you know, I think it makes a good point. I'm gonna go over to you, Councillor Fest.
Thank you. I'm still after this good discussion, while I might hope for more windfalls, I think they're rare. And that's my impression from 10 years on council. And I think that we need this base set of expectations that users pay, and that's supported by the public input that we received. And it seems to me pretty clearly described in this policy, including the repayment terms. And I think clarity helps everybody go forward, making plans and thinking about the future with better understanding, shared understanding, I guess is the word I'm looking for. So I'd like to move that council approve local area service funding policy number 26-02.
Moved by Councillor Fest, seconded by Councillor Wake. I'm not seeing any further discussion on this item. I will, Councillor
Can
Gideon.
I have one question? If there's something that happens in the future, can there be an exception to this policy, or do we have to make an amendment?
Council has policies. I look to the CAO on this one.
I was gonna add, before we, go ahead and any decision to defer anything, is that, this policy could be considered, a bit of a interim kind of policy placeholder. We are doing the water, like the island-wide water, study, and planning is something we put forward to council. I think part of that discussion, that water system planning, needs to be on how we look at consolidating these LSAs, whether that's going to be one system or three system, what that looks like. And there's various governance models around how you manage those. So it might be a possibility that we have this policy in place now, but when we do the work of the water planning and it comes back to council and there's some key decisions to be made, that we have to revisit this anyways. So that's a part of it. The issue with when you get grant funding and you apply to certain LSAs, you get questions from the other LSAs like, why wasn't that given to me? Why didn't I have that opportunity? And oftentimes we don't have the luxury of picking when we're going to do these projects. It's either a VCH mandate or there's some critical infrastructure issue that implores us to have to do that work at that time. And so we get into this issue is we have to do the work now, but we don't have a grant, we can't wait on a grant opportunity. So kind of creates this disparity. And these are types of issues that we wrestle with at the staff level. And that's why we want to do this comprehensive water planning. So this is something that could be in place until we have that completed and we have maybe other governance models come forward.
Okay, I will call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 Any opposed, raise your hand, say nay. And that carries with Councillor Morris in opposition.
I'm in opposition because there's possibility of using statutory reserves.
Moving on to, yes.
Can we have a 2-minute break? Break.
Sure, yeah.
Thanks.
So we are reconvened here at 3:20 PM and moving on to 8.1 West Side Water Systems Cost Allocation Policy. We have our CFO joining us here again.
Thank you, Mayor. A little bit of a segue from the previous discussion. This is the first look at the draft policy that I put before council today as a way to build a model in order to allocate operating and capital costs among the three integrated West Side water systems. So that's Shoal Bay, King Edward Bay, and Blue Water Park. Now that Blue Water Park has completed the upgrade of the water mains, we are proposing that we treat the systems effectively as one operating system. They're all using shared water source and reservoir and treatment facilities in order to treat the water. So the policy proposes that the costs, all operating costs, except for fire hydrant maintenance and interest and principal repayment on long-term debt, will going forward be shared proportionately among the three local service areas. So proportionately, by that, we mean by number of properties included within each system. As for the capital asset costs, all capital asset replacements and upgrades will also be funded jointly on the same proportionate basis by the residents and property owners within the three local service areas, except for the cost of water main and service connections, which the local service areas should continue to fund on an individual local service area basis. So this is this conversation, we've had meetings with chairs of the three local service areas a couple of years ago. This was the messaging kind of coming out of those discussions. And in order to get feedback on this policy, I'm proposing to make this available to users on the west side through the electronic distribution email network, as well as we'll make it available on the website for public input and review. And we'll bring that back in the next couple of weeks to council for final decision on this one.
Any questions or feedback for the CFO? And then just noting that this one is just to receive for information and then go to over to you, Councilor Morris.
How, you haven't defined it proportionately allocated. I missed that again.
Okay, so add something to do about number of properties within each system.
Yeah, so is it by the number of properties, number of connections, volume? of
Yeah, it's
water?
by number of properties and I'll add that in.
And what, for the same number of properties, what happens if there's two connections on a property, like a house and a suite?
Well, they'll only have one water bill, so that's really the only, it has to go down by number of utility accounts there.
Number, I'm shooting, yeah, number of properties. The amount of water used depends on the size of the family, the size, the number of times they're there.
Yeah.
Number of people living.
Yeah.
Or whether they're just over consuming.
Yeah, well, it's all metered.
User rates, I guess.
It's all metered, so that volumetric charge will pick up the additional people, but basically the fixed cost, we
Yeah, this is just the main amount allocated to the LAC in total.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to combine all of the costs and then redistribute them back out to the water systems at the end of the year, and I'll do that based on a number of property connections. Basis.
A bunch of vacant properties not connected. Does that make a difference?
Well, that is the problem with King Edward Bay that had many vacant properties for so long, so we did choose properties versus connected properties.
Thank you.
Councilor Morris, Councilor Gaydon.
I'm assuming that we'll get some feedback from the public, but you mentioned that we'd bring it back to council within a couple of weeks.
Mhm.
So are we going to give a longer period of time for them to pay attention? React?
We'll send it out to the distribution network, also they will see it directly, all those people who sign up and subscribe, which we encourage at every single local service area meeting that we've ever had. And once it gets out there, it will very quickly make the rounds within their own neighborhood. Notification.
Right.
Yeah.
With some sort of a date when it's coming back to council?
Yeah, we'll give them a reasonable amount of time.
Thank you, Councillor Getty. Councillor Jurgensen.
Thank you. Love the work that's gone into this. Thank you very much. I did want to just give some voice, though, to the method at which this is being sent out to users. It's long troubled me, not just with a distribution like this, but with municipal distributions in general, that we do have to contend with a digital literacy divide. I see, the electronic distribution system and the website as great avenues to get this out, but do we, I suppose a two-pronged question here, do we have the ability to know which users are not able to use either of these systems for one reason or another, and reach them that way, or would we just have to send out a general mail out otherwise to attempt to reach them through another means?
I think we would just have to send out a general mail out. I don't know that we have information as to which users have challenges accessing digital media.
Thank you, Councillor Jurgensen. Councillor Fast.
Thank you, first of all, for answering my question, which is how do you figure out the proportionally? And that sounds good to me. I'm noticing in the previous one about the local service area, they were asking for 30 days. So maybe if people had 30 days to respond or something, that might be a way of addressing that interest.
Yeah.
Thirdly, I think there's also for people that are not the digital divide that Councillor Jurgensen is talking about, would something like this also go into the undercurrent as a notice that input is being requested? And I'm looking to the corporate officer about that. And plus, I just wanted to say both internet access and tech counseling is available at the library, but go ahead.
Through the chair, yes, we can always insert advertisement of new initiatives in the undercurrent in our usual island page. Don't typically for targeted water systems. I think we would select a targeted mail out over a general undercurrent notice. Yeah, it's only about 250 households.
Thank you.
Yep, there's nobody else on the speakers list.
I move that council receive the draft West Side Water Systems cost allocation policy for information. The council directs staff to proceed with public engagement on the draft policy.
Okay, moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any Councillor Morris?
Will the policy be a slight amendment made to say how the proportionality is going to be?
Yeah, I'll add that.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Not seeing any further comments, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 And that carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Watson. Moving on to 8.2, award of contract for council chamber conference room audio visual solution. We have our corporate officer joining us today. Out of an abundance of caution, I am going to declare a conflict of interest on this item as I have a family member who works on island for one of the bidders. So I will turn it over to the acting mayor and leave the proceedings for now. Yes.
I probably should make the same declaration.
Okay.
Because I have a family member who works for one of the bidders.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I don't have a family member, but I've done a lot of work with two of those companies and I know all of them, and I don't know if that constitutes a conflict or not, but okay.
Appearance of conflict.
I'll just move so people can see me and I can see you
Anything
guys.
add context.
Yeah.
Sorry, it may add context.
It might, yeah.
It might be a bonus.
Okay.
Okay, so we're on 8.2, word of contract, and we've got the report in front of us. And it's our corporate officer who's got her name on here. Do you want to introduce the topic?
I would. I just wanted to present the recommendation for awarding the contract. It's mostly laid out in the staff report, but I'll just quickly go over the details now. So in 2025, we deferred a budget request for AV improvements to this room to assess the performance of the existing equipment that was moved over from the old municipal hall. We wanted to see if it would work in this new space, and we've discovered and realized that it is not appropriate and it does not allow for accessibility of people with hearing, different hearing abilities, as well as for our remote attendees. It's mostly due to the microphones and the audio systems. It just doesn't work in this room. So council did ask staff to explore improved solutions with a focus on accessibility. The accessibility advisory team was consulted during the development of the RFP as well. So we did make sure that we got information from them about what would be desired. We received 7 proposals evaluated on technical understanding, experience, equipment quality, cost, and support. Overall, the 7 proposals, Coastal Integrated ranked the highest with a score of 80.63%. Integrated's proposal meets all objectives such as clear audio, noise reduction, hybrid integration, and a user-friendly control interface. Their solution includes individual microphones, ceiling speakers, cameras, displays, and assistive listening devices. They also offer to reinstall the existing equipment in this room to another meeting room in the community center, which would expand our AV capability without having to engage another consultant. So as a bonus, also Coastal Integrated included in their proposal that they provide a full 3-year warranty on service and workmanship. And they do have permanent local service staff that would be able to provide fast support in the event that we need it. So the total cost of the proposal is $87,259 plus taxes. We secured a $25,000 accessibility grant, which requires substantial completion by March 2026. The remaining approximately $62,000 would come from the Capital Renewal and Replacement Reserve. This was outlined in the Administration Department's capital budget request that you received on December 18th, I believe it was last year, and that's included in the staff report. So just concluding that, I believe that Coastal Integrated's proposal will resolve our current AV challenges, will enhance accessibility and deliver a future-ready system for council and community use, and staff recommend proceeding with this award.
Thank you. I'm gonna go with John and then Judy and then Tim. Sorry, Alex, I'll go with you. Can I go with Alex first? Sure. It's on the committee. Thank you. Go ahead, Alex Jurgensen.
Thank you, Chair. Honestly, it looks really good. Coastal Integrated, I really think has a strong proposal here. The only 2 pieces that I would like to know is, again, around accessibility, especially since this project is being funded almost 1/3 by an accessibility grant, whether the accessibility of the interface, like we talk a lot about user interface here and how that's user friendly, but is it accessible as well? And is there any provision in a contract to be signed with them, or can one be put in to ensure that when they move the existing equipment to a new conference room, that user interface also be made accessible at that time?
Can I ask what do you mean by user interface be accessible?
Thank you. No, it's a great question. All of the equipment that they're going to install, much like the existing equipment, has a control interface where you have to be able to set settings and essentially do setup and tear down of the equipment from a user perspective, and that if not made accessible, that does limit who can and cannot run a meeting in a space like this. It's essentially making sure that user interface guidelines for accessibility are followed for the design and implementation of user interfaces needed to set up and tear down the equipment in both this conference room and where this existing equipment gets relocated to.
Thank you.
Through the chair, in response to your first question, Councillor Jurgensen, the user interface is a control panel that's included in the proposal. And I believe it is a touch screen, so it doesn't have built-in accessibility features, but We can ask the contractor about maybe the touch screen also having an audio component. Like when it's touched, it repeats back what the control is that you're trying to activate.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that. Touchscreens can be made accessible and are often done so in the industry. So I think there's ways that it can be done. Should the contractor wish, I would be happy to meet with them as well.
And then as for the moving of the current equipment into the smaller meeting room, the current equipment doesn't have a control panel at all. So it would literally be a lateral move of the microphones, camera, and displays that are in this room to another room, and we wouldn't really be adding any additional equipment to that.
That helps. It was the wording about the user interface in their proposal that made me question, but honestly didn't have a huge understanding of the current equipment in this room as far as the setup and teardown goes. So I'm glad to hear that for that second piece.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Jurgensen, then Councillor Saunders.
Thank you. Got one question, one comment, and the question was just through the chair, sorry. The question is really just based on what corporate officer just told us. I'm just curious to what's going to happen with the legacy equipment. It just curious more than anything else. The comment I wanted to make is in the review of these of the responses, like 4 of them are really close, and the top 2, they're literally a coin flip. They're a hair's breadth apart, and I'm not questioning in any way the the choice or anything else along those lines. I looked at the evaluation criteria and they're the ones you should be using. I just want to point out that there is some subjectivity to this, and the subjectivity comes in 2 places. One is the weighting, which the group responsible for this chose that weighting. There's nothing wrong with it, and I'm not criticizing it in any way, but weighting it 29% instead of 30%, 28%, that kind of thing could have completely changed this. And I just want us to be aware of that, not just the weighting, but also the, when you look at the interior part of each one of those criteria. So relevant experience and qualifications, again, with the thing so close, is Councillor Wake's experience better than mine? Because that becomes a very subjective thing. So I'm not suggesting we need to change or reevaluate or anything else. I just want to comment that this is less than a coin flip. I've scored a lot of RFPs and I've almost never had anything that was like that close. So for me, if any one of those top 4 got chosen, given that I know 2 of them and the quality of their work, and I won't say which 2, I'd be quite comfortable with any one of those because you guys have clearly done the work evaluating this. I just wanted to point out that there's no difference in those top 4 that I can see.
Okay.
Sorry, the legacy equipment. Did you answer that, or did I miss an answer?
Through the chair, so if I can clarify on the evaluating process, we used 4 staff and who are by no means technical experts. So yeah, it was subjective ranking, and we had a weighting to the ranking. So technical understanding and methodology was 30%.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I put that in the stuff.
You did. I didn't need a response to that either. I was just commenting on it. You've done things the right way. I have no issue with that whatsoever. I'm just commenting that it's a toss up, and I'm quite comfortable with what you've done here. But yeah, I was just wondering about what's going to become of this.
Yeah, so we're gonna, part of Coastal Integrated's proposal was that they repurpose the existing equipment to another part of the building.
Oh.
I don't believe that was part of any of the other proposals, and while it's not really a scope in the project that we included in the RFP, I do think it would make things faster and more efficient for that equipment to be repurposed.
Well, there's one of those subjective things that can make the difference.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Another thing that really tipped it over for Coastal Integrated was their warranty, which is full 3 years on workmanship, whereas the others provided a range of 90 days to 1 year.
Okay.
1 year would be a paid. So this was included in the
Okay.
installs. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. On to Councillor Caden.
So the rewiring this room and making it so that it's much more accessible is a priority, and I'm very happy with this. My question was, when we've sometimes when we've had the bigger community meetings and there's an overflow into the theater, then it's been difficult to hook up. I guess it's the Zoom and getting questions from there. So that's not included in the range of this proposal, but are we getting a system that is going to be adapted if we get other funding and some way of linking them?
Yes, so it's not in the scope of this project, in terms of having a seamless integration with the restaurant system in the theater. However, I do believe our overflow protocols that we've tested in one community pool, I believe worked pretty well. So that would be streaming the Zoom meeting as a live attendee to the theater. So people sitting in the theater could actually approach and as like an attendee of the Zoom meeting. So they could actually approach, or we would have, approach the microphone in the theater. So that's through the theater system. So that, I believe the audio system in the theater that the Zoom meeting audio would be coming out of. Sorry, I don't have the technical terms, but that would be transmitted by the wireless, the Auracast device, the transmitter.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, see points about future proof. Maybe that'll be my question later. Go ahead, Councillor Wade.
I'm just wondering if, I think it was Sky, and some of their members who were the first ones to sort of point this out, and I just wonder if they've been, if the solution has been run by them or not. Have they been involved at all?
Through the chair, we did not consult specifically or directly with Sky. However, one of the members of Sky is a member of the Accessibility Advisory Committee as well. And so I believe they were able to put on both hats and review that.
Great. And the mic, it says there's directional microphones, but will there be a microphone for each person sitting around?
Yes, that's what directional. So each individual will have a microphone.
Okay.
And there will also be, the chair can also control who's able to speak into that microphone.
That'd be good.
And the camera, there will be a microphone at the presenter table or delegation table. And the camera would switch direction based on if that microphone is picking up.
Great. And just a comment, I mean, the really thorough job of going through it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wade. And then my only question remaining is about the words future-proof. And I just wondered if you could explain that a little bit. I was looking at the bottom bullet under objectives.
Yes, through the chair. So future proofing is one of the requirements that we put in the RFP itself, and that this vendor was able to demonstrate that the system is scalable. So for example, if we did want to add more microphones, more cameras, more assisted listening devices at any future time, the system could be scaled to allow that. So, it would come with a cost, but it wouldn't have to be like an entire overhaul like we're doing now.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, I've been down my speakers list. I see Councillor Jurgensen, you're on the list again. Please go ahead.
Sorry, no, just hand was up from before.
Maybe you'd like to make the motion.
I would not mind doing that at all. I would move the motion as written.
Okay,
Second.
who was that? Thank you. John Saunders, we've got a motion moved and seconded as written. I'm going to read it out just for the record here, or in case anybody doesn't have the paper, that council award the contract for council chamber and conference room audio visual AV overhaul, BIM RFP 2025-005 to Coastal Integrated at a cost of 87,259 plus taxes. So we've got a motion moved and seconded. Any last? I'm going to call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Alex?
Aye.
Very good. That passes unanimously. Thank you. And we can bring in our other colleagues again and get my stuff out of here.
Get it out of the bar.
Yeah, Janet, fix me.
It passed unanimously.
Right on.
But not for your friends, so too bad.
We don't even know.
All right, well, we're not going to get into that. We're still in the midst of a regular council meeting. So with 8.2 being concluded, and thank you, Councillor Fast, for stepping in and taking over. We will move on to section 11, new business. 11.1, the TransLink Mayor's Council meeting was canceled, so I don't have any updates on TransLink for Metro Vancouver from the start of the year. So I will look to our trustees if there are any updates from press council that you'd like to.
Okay, I'll start. Trust Council was in the beginning of December, so we had a little bit of reporting since then. In the information items, you can look at 12.2, 12.4, which is the trust area services report. It sort of tells a lot of what we're involved in. It doesn't include the Islands Trust Conservancy. That comes as a separate report as one of the things that we contribute to. And then 12.5, you'll notice is an agreement with the province to start working on Crown lands agreements, where the Islands Trust at least wants to be informed when there's a change being proposed. And there's a longstanding agreement that needs updating badly. So Trust Council is going to be in March 10 to 12 in Duncan or online as usual. And I've got a financial planning committee next week meeting. So we'll be looking at the budget under the new framework, I guess I should say, which is based on the operational review that the new CAO did. And so there'll be a bunch of changes in the budget, and I don't expect it'll get any cheaper. So that's why we'll be having, what will be one of the things we'll be dealing with in our financial planning committee next week. And I can report on Ocean Watch Task Force, or I can do that another time. Another time is probably fun. Go over to you. Trustee Getty, anything to add?
Nothing since the council meeting in December, but we're gearing up for the another governance committee meeting coming up at the end of this month. And I've got to get the agenda sorted out by this Wednesday, so.
Very good.
It's been quiet.
Start of the year, coming back. Is it?
Just a question.
Yes.
So what is the Bowen requisition at right now?
We had very rough numbers from the financial officer over there based on like over lunchtime. So I didn't write them down, I didn't bring them, but they're in the same ballpark as they were before. So what, 23?
Those can increase.
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I don't know
Yeah,
that.
the CAO's report was for 2 new permanent positions, so there's quite a lot to talk about.
Yes, our CFO with the hand up over there.
My latest information from the CFO for the Islands Trust was that it's sitting at 609,000.
Last year it was 400 and something.
460.
Thank you.
That will certainly be something to talk about at budget time. Yes, Councilor Wake.
Thank you. Under the, in the report from the Islands Trust, under the support for planning services, there's a number of communities, Gabriel, Salt Spring, Denman, North Pender, who are getting communications and engagement support for their official community plans. And I just wonder if we have, and we just didn't get mentioned, or,
I can respond to that. That's not, that's local trust area part of the budget that Bowen doesn't contribute to.
oh, I see.
So we're just outside of that whole stream of work and we self-direct.
Not seeing any further questions, we'll move on to question period. I'll look to our corporate officer for anyone online or anyone in the room that has questions they would like to ask the council.
No one online, and I don't see anyone in the.
Okay. And with that, I will look for the adjourn, moved by Councilor Getty, seconded by Councilor Saunders. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
And that carried unanimously. And we will return in